Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Let me see if that works better. We're going to go ahead and get started with the Community Revitalization Fellowship Informational webinar. I'm so excited to have you all on the call with us this afternoon to talk about this exciting opportunity for grassroots leaders that are working to revitalize their neighborhoods. My name is Liz Kozub. I am the Associate Director of Leadership and Education at the Center for Community Progress. My plan is to provide information on the fellowship program and to answer any questions that you might have about your potential involvement in the program. Let's go ahead and get started. So for those of you that are new to the Center for Community Progress and our programming, we are a national nonprofit that is dedicated to fostering equitable communities by addressing vacancy and abandonment. We work in communities all across the country, and since 2010 have partnered with over 300 communities in over 35 different states, including Puerto Rico. We do so by providing technical assistance, by providing leadership and educational opportunities. We engage in policy and research and advocacy efforts as well. So the items on your screen are what I plan to cover as part of today's discussion. We will talk about the program kind of from a high level, as well as provide details about the roles of the participants in the program and what they would be expected to do if selected for the program. I'll also talk about the application requirements and how that process will look over the next month. And I want to leave a good amount of time for questions at the end. So please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen as we move through the presentation, but just know that I'll be addressing them at the very end. And I'll be providing a high-level overview of the program, but I really encourage you to check out our request for applications, which is located on our website under the Leadership and Education tab in the Community Revitalization Fellowship. My colleague Christina will also be putting a link into the chat so you could get there as we move through today's discussion. There's also a frequently asked questions tab, so you might have a question at the outset of this presentation that you can get answered fairly quickly by checking out that information there. So let's go ahead and get started. So at Community Progress, we acknowledge that residents know best the challenges of vacancy and abandonment within their own communities and which properties are causing problems to them and their neighbors. We also recognize that residents are oftentimes engaging in activities to better their communities and to revitalize these properties in a volunteer capacity, and they may not have access to professional development opportunities to really develop and sharpen their skills and knowledge to address vacancy and abandonment work in their neighborhoods. So the fellowship really does aim to build knowledge and tools amongst resident leaders to build connections both locally within cities and also across cities, so that grassroots leaders can be better equipped to drive decisions at their local decision-making tables. In 2022 and 23, the fellowship will be focused on assisting residents in their efforts for new policy initiatives, for new projects related to vacancy and abandonment through the practice of creative placemaking. And I'll talk about what we mean by that in a little later on. So the application is really based on a cohort model. So there is one institutional partner that will serve as the main point of contact for the program. The institutional partner can be a community foundation, they can be a nonprofit, or they can be a land banking authority. Local governments and city departments cannot serve in the role of the institutional partner. So if you are from a city on the call today, I really encourage you to think about who's leading revitalization efforts in your communities, and if any of those organizations fit within those three eligible entities, certainly pass along the information or connect with them to see if they're interested in participating. The program is open to small and mid-sized communities with populations of 300,000 or less. So when we say the word communities, we're really talking about the city, the village, the township, the municipality. We're not considering a neighborhood a community. We're looking at that legal jurisdiction. So if you are from a neighborhood of 10,000 residents, but your city population has 700,000 residents, you would not be eligible to apply for the program. Through an application process, 6 resident leaders and 1 institutional partner will be chosen from 3 different communities. So that means there will be 18 fellows in total and 3 institutional partners in total. The program will feature 3 learning exchanges, 1 in each community that is participating, and residents will receive stipends for their participation in those events. Community Progress will also host a virtual workshop for members of each communities to expand the knowledge and insights gained from participation in the fellowship. We will also be providing $14,000 to the institutional partners for support in community engagement activities, as well as a local project. Participants would be invited to attend the Reclaiming Vacant Properties Conference that's happening in Chicago in September. I'm going to go into all of the details of these different programmatic items a little later on, but I just wanted to provide an overview up front. The fellowship will blend classroom technical trainings with peer-to-peer learning, and that's really the unique model of this program that we found a lot of value in over the years. So fellows will receive a training from a faculty of national experts that will sharpen their skills and knowledge in addressing vacant properties. But we also recognize the incredible amount of knowledge and leadership and expertise that the fellows bring to this program. So the fellows will have an opportunity to share their own challenges, their own successes with the other leaders within the program. And it'll be an opportunity for this peer-to-peer exchange and network building. The goal is really to build upon that existing technical knowledge related to revitalization, to make connections amongst peers, and to strengthen relationships with decision makers back home. So I mentioned that the program is focused on creative placemaking, and I just want to touch on what we mean when we talk about creative placemaking. From our learnings from communities all across the country, we've identified 3 essential elements that define creative placemaking, and really when talking about addressing vacancy and abandonment in communities. The first being that it's place-based. Creative placemaking leaders root their work in a specific place, and it serves the people of that place. So this includes making sure projects reflect the physical, the social, and the economic priorities of a particular community. The second and absolutely critical piece is that creative placemaking needs to center communities and existing residents in all decision-making that happens. So this can take the form of engaging residents and neighbors, engaging business owners, talking about what the place can and should be, how it should remain, and inform decisions moving forward. And the third is that it is just one tool in the toolbox in terms of revitalizing communities and neighborhoods, and it can and should be used alongside other tools such as housing preservation, economic development, resident serving programs such as social services. And when we're talking about addressing vacancy and abandonment in particular, it can be used alongside tactics of code enforcement, of demolition, of resale and reuse of properties. So I'm just going to highlight a few examples to really root that kind of theoretical idea into some context. So all of the examples that I'll provide are also of communities that have or are currently participating in the program. This example comes from Montgomery, Alabama, where the King's Canvas, which is a local nonprofit, is focused on using creative placemaking as an economic driver for their historically disinvested neighborhood. The leaders of that nonprofit activated a formerly commercial space for an artist studio and gallery and community space. They also use vacant lots to hold pop-up events and artist marketplaces. This example comes from Gary, Indiana, where the Decay Devils, which is a local nonprofit, actually took ownership of this former rail station. They've been using this space for pop-up events and temporary arts installation. The organization is currently on a funding campaign for permanent reuse of this space for multi-purpose retail space, gallery space, and gathering space for the community. This project is in Newark, New Jersey, where they activated a pocket park in a residential neighborhood. It serves as a gathering space for pop-up events and for performances. My Brother's Keeper local chapter installed a mural on the building in the background, and they used the space for programming as well. In Fitchburg, Massachusetts, Activate Mill Street has transformed a forgotten alleyway into a vibrant place for people to gather and to attend events. So they have this small outdoor space, which really bookends a Main Street commercial district. And they have community-centered art, low-cost lighting, a painted sidewalk, and they do programming and events at the space. So you can find more inspiration on like what do we mean by creative placemaking on vacant properties on our website. We host a creative placemaking database, which has some really inspiring examples from leaders all across the country using creative placemaking to address problems in their neighborhoods. We also have 3 publications on creative placemaking on our website. So I'd encourage you to check that out if you're looking and wanting to learn more about creative placemaking. So now that I've touched on this kind of high-level overview of the program, I want to talk in greater detail about the roles of the cohort and who makes up the cohort. So I mentioned that the institutional partner really serves as the main point of contact between the Center for Community Progress, both in the application process as well as throughout the fellowship if they're selected to participate in the program. One person from the institutional partner will be expected to participate in all 3 learning exchanges, and they'll be expected to engage the fellows before the first learning exchange and after the 3 learning exchanges that take place. I'll talk about these events a little later. And as previously mentioned, the eligible entities are community foundations, nonprofits, and land banks. Governments and city departments are not eligible to serve in this role. Institutional partners must have deep connections to the community. They must have a commitment to community engagement and racial equity. Institutional partners are there to support the fellows in the program, and also after the program ends, we hope that they really have a leadership position where they can strengthen relationships and revitalization efforts locally. They'll also be responsible for administering $10,000 of funding to be used towards a community project. Next up are the fellows. Fellows are the grassroots community leaders and really the main focus for the fellowship program. Fellows will be expected to participate fully in 3 two-day learning exchanges and participate in the local gatherings that are arranged by the institutional partner. For this program, we're looking for grassroots community leaders, both those individuals that have established relationships within their communities, but also the rising stars in this work, that their work and their advocacy efforts could really be elevated by participating in the program. And the cohort of residents should really reflect the diverse range of skills, of connections to folks in the community, and also potentially neighborhoods across the community. Community Progress expects that most, if not all, of the fellows will be engaged in their neighborhoods as volunteers, not as career professionals. Again, really trying to provide a unique opportunity for those individuals that don't have that, that don't have options to get that professional development opportunity outside of this program. Residents will be asked to complete a resident questionnaire as part of the application package, and they'll be asked to talk about what their involvement is within their neighborhood. They can be members of formal or informal groups. Some of those are listed on your screen, such as Black clubs, members of faith communities. They can be artists and culture bearers for their neighborhoods. In the application package, we'll also be asked for communities to describe specific creative placemaking projects. And so we ask that the residents have some leadership or involvement in those projects so that they can describe the challenges that happened and what led to their successes. So it's important to think about what those projects might be, and also making sure that the fellows that are part of the application are aligned with those projects. So those were the roles of the participants that make up each community cohort. Next, I'm going to be talking about the key programmatic items for the fellowship. And before launching into the details, I want to talk about the costs. So thanks to the generous support from the Oak Foundation and the Kresge Foundation, institutional partners and fellows are not responsible for any direct financial costs related to participating in the program. In addition to that, each fellow will receive a $230 stipend for each learning exchange they attend, so a total of $690, and all of their costs for participating will be covered. The institutional partner will receive $14,000 in funding to support its participation in the program. $4,000 can be used to reimburse for their time spent on the program, providing guidance and mentorship and logistical support and supporting any meetings that are required. The remaining $10,000 should be used in support of a creative placemaking project to address vacancy or disinvestment within your community. And we've intentionally left the descriptions of how to use that $10,000 very flexible, because we know that each community has different projects underway. They have different needs and challenges and ideas on how they might want to use that funding. So we ask that as part of the application package, the institutional partner either share what might be currently brewing in a community, or share how that decision-making process will look and how that money will be spent. So the key programmatic items for the fellowship are the 3 learning exchanges that take place. 1 learning exchange will take place in each of the 3 communities that are participating in the fellowship, so 3 in total. The learning exchanges typically span Friday through Saturday, but oftentimes the visiting cohorts will come in on a Thursday night. So fellows should be prepared to spend at least 2 nights in each of the cities that they will travel to. Community Progress will lead the planning of these events, but we will request assistance from the community that we're visiting for that particular learning exchange, and I'll go into that shortly. The learning exchanges will feature a neighborhood tour of the host community, and there will also be technical and leadership trainings as part of each learning exchange. So I mentioned we'll be looking to the host community to help support the learning exchanges. Given that you know your communities best, we're going to be requesting assistance in helping finding event spaces to hold the trainings, helping us connect to local vendors that you want to support and showcase to the visiting communities. Community Progress will pay for all of these items and hold the contracts with any event facilities and vendors, but we really just want to make sure that we're supporting those people and places that are most important to you all. We'll ask each cohort to plan a community tour for the visiting residents and fellows to learn from. And that tour should really highlight grassroots-led projects, those that are using creative placemaking and arts and culture to combat vacancy and disinvestment in communities. It will be an opportunity to showcase those successful projects and also to share some of the challenges that you've all experienced as a way that peer exchange and learning can happen. We'll also ask each community to help identify local leaders or legislative leaders that know a lot of information about vacancy and abandonment in your community and working to address it. This often comes into play when we do that community tour, if there's a stop of a really impressive revitalization project. Having those key leaders there on the site to have a conversation about that work is really helpful. We will also host a virtual community revitalization workshop for each of the 3 communities participating in the program. So the purpose of that workshop is really to expand the information and knowledge that is gained by the 6 fellows to a larger and broader base of residents within your own community. Community Progress staff will work with each of the 3 cities to determine what the best content for that workshop might be. It'll be about 2 hours and it'll be held probably via Zoom or some other web-based portal after the 3 learning exchanges. So after we have an opportunity to go through the program and to understand your community's challenges and potential opportunities. So I mentioned that each of the institutional partners will be expected to convene the 6 fellows 4 times throughout the program, before the first learning exchange and after each of the 3 learning exchanges that take place. The structure of these events is really flexible, and we leave it up to the institutional partners to plan. We think it's a good opportunity to debrief from the learning exchanges that take place, to talk about what fellows heard, what was interesting, what they could potentially implement in their own communities, opportunities to brainstorm new projects or to make connections with local decision makers. Institutional partners can use part of their administrative funding to help support some of these meetings. So I talked quite a bit about what the roles are of the participants in the program, and I just want to be really clear about what Community Progress's role is. We will be developing all of the agendas and materials, securing the faculty of national experts to provide the training. We'll be providing guidance to the institutional partners and the fellows throughout the course of the fellowship, and we'll be conducting all of the logistical and administrative items that are required for this program to be successful. We will be securing all of the flights and the hotels. So we don't anticipate any reimbursable expenses for fellows or institutional partners. So we'll be covering those costs up front. Our hope is to make this program as accessible to folks as possible. We can't talk about events these days without talking about what our COVID-19 safety protocols will be. While our hopes and dreams are that by the time we implement this program, we'll be in a safer place nationally related to the pandemic. However, we know that's likely not going to be the case, and this will be a situation that we will have to continue to navigate throughout the course of the fellowship. So we'll be following all data, guidelines, and recommendations from public health officials, and we may require negative testing prior to each of the learning exchanges, proof of vaccination status, masks, social distancing, and other items kind of as they are recommended. On-site safety protocols will be shared 30 days prior to each learning exchange. And while our goal is to hold all of these events in person as planned, we may need to modify parts of the program, which could include holding events or trainings virtually. So as part of this year's participation in the fellowship, we will be providing scholarships to the Center for Community Progress's Reclaiming Vacant Properties Conference. So fellows and institutional partners can attend free of charge. We will cover the cost of lodging for the conference and provide stipends to travel to the conference. The Reclaiming Vacant Properties Conference is one of the most successful national conferences in community development and brings together nonprofits, governments, resident leaders, business leaders, philanthropic institutions, all of whom are committed to strengthening their communities and addressing vacancy across the country. This year's theme for the conference will be Responding to Crisis, Building an Equitable and Resilient Future, and it will be held in Chicago on September 7th through the 9th. After the 3 communities are selected to participate in the fellowship, we'll have the locations for where we'll be visiting kind of set in stone of the selected communities, and we'll work in partnership with each of the communities to confirm the dates of the learning exchanges. We ask that you review the potential learning exchange dates that are listed on the cover letter as part of the application, and flag with us any potential conflicts that you anticipate your cohort having. So we may be proposing a date where you know that there is an annual reoccurring city event that happens on that date. So feel free to still submit your application and just flag that as a potential problem for your group. On your screen is an illustrative timeline. All of the dates will be confirmed with the participating cohorts and are subject to change, but we just wanted to give you a sense of what the commitment will look like over the next 18 months to 2 years. And as you can see on the screen, we'll also be requesting that you stay in contact with us. After the fellowship is complete, we want to be able to track the impact of the program so that we can learn from all of the work that you're doing and improve upon it, and also find ways to support you in years to come. So let's move on to talk about the actual application. So there are 4 required items as part of the application package for it to be considered complete. The first is a cover sheet. The cover sheet requests contact information for the institutional partners. It requests an identification of the 6 fellows proposed for the program and some brief community background information. There is an institutional partner questionnaire, which asks for background on the organization that is serving in that role. And it requests that the institutional partner provide background on their involvement in resident engagement and community revitalization. It asks them to describe what relationships and connections they have within the city and a broad range of decision makers within the city. Also, we ask them to describe their commitment to racial equity. Each of the 6 proposed fellows must also complete a short questionnaire. It asks the fellows to describe their involvement in the community and what they hope to gain out of their participation in the fellowship. And then there are 6 narrative questions that we ask the institutional partner and from guidance developed from the fellows to complete. The narrative questions allow your cohort to describe the challenges that are occurring within your community and how your cohort is addressing those challenges. This is really a big part of the application. And as I mentioned kind of earlier on, that the program is focused on how vacancy and abandonment can be addressed through the use of arts and culture and creative placemaking. We'll also ask that each of the applicants describe projects that are using arts and culture to address vacancy and provide some information about what we might be able to learn from your community if we do select you and visit. We also have an option to provide supplemental materials as part of the application. So this is a really good opportunity to provide pictures that help to illuminate some of the projects and great work that's happening in your communities. You can provide maps to showcase the challenge of vacancy and abandonment in your community, or news articles, really anything that could help supplement the narrative items on your application. The selection criteria that we'll be using to review applications is located on your screen. In short, we're really interested in engaging places that have a need for additional capacity to address vacancy and abandonment and disinvestment. And we also want to ensure that there is active, engaged efforts to address these challenges. We don't need the cohorts to have all of the answers to the problems in their community. No community has all the answers, but we do anticipate that the institutional partners and the fellows be ready and willing to learn and to engage in conversations and discussions with the faculty and also with the peers that they'll be working with throughout the fellowship program. We also want to ensure that the institutional partner has a deep commitment to resident engagement and a commitment to racial equity. So on your screen are the important dates as part of this process. The applications are due on Friday, February 25th at 5:00 p.m. Eastern Time, and they can be emailed in a PDF document to crf@communityprogress.org. We will be notifying all applicants of the status of their application by April 8th. And shortly following that announcement, we'll start the work of engaging the 3 selected communities for the program and start nailing down the learning exchange dates. So again, just as a reminder, the application is located on our website under the Leadership and Education tab, and Christina did add it to the chat early on in the presentation. So I see a lot of questions have come in. I am going to just take a moment to pause and to see if I see any trends with the questions. And certainly feel free to add questions now that we've gone through the bulk of the information. All right. So we have a question here. Will travel be covered for the fellows attending the learning exchanges? Yes, travel will be covered. Community Progress will purchase those flights if flights are required directly, or we will arrange for transportation if there's an opportunity and cities are close enough together that driving can get them there. So yes, travel will be covered. Do we have to have 6 leaders, or could there be less? The strongest applications will have 6 leaders to participate in the fellowship. So my recommendation would be to submit an application with 6 leaders. There's a question about the population size and eligibility surrounding that. A few questions about that. So the program is open to communities with 300,000 folks or less, population of 300,000 or less. So if you're applying from a city of 700,000, you would not be eligible, even if your proposed initiative is based on a particular neighborhood that only has 10,000 people. Since that neighborhood sits within a city of 700 or 800,000, the community would not be eligible to participate. There's a question about an unincorporated community and their eligibility. Yes, unincorporated communities are eligible to apply. I'm happy to have conversations about what that might look like. Typically, we've suggested using the population of the county, but yes, unincorporated communities are eligible to apply. I'm just trying to see if I can answer a few of these at a time. So there's a question about some clarity around the cohort and how many fellows versus institutional partners. So the program is set up where each cohort has 1 institutional partner and 6 fellows. So that is your cohort that will be applying to the fellowship. And then we expect to get a number of applications that all consist of 1 institutional partner and 6 fellows. And we'll be selecting 3 of those communities to join the fellowship. So there's a question about does the artistic projects have to be completed, or will talking about projects and like existing plans but that aren't yet fully executed be an option? And so I would say yes, but. So when we go to your community, we do hope to see existing revitalization projects that are in a completed stage or in a fairly completed stage, so that we have an opportunity to physically go to that space to talk about what's happened or talk about what plans to be happened. We have in the past gone to projects that are kind of midway through their execution and talked about the challenges and what they hope to come from that work. And so my suggestion would be, if you have those examples in your community, to try to think of places that we might be able to go to that are complete, so that we have that good mix of projects to visit while we're in your particular city. Okay. So there's a question about land trust being a potential institutional partner. And I think it would depend on how that land trust is set up. If they're a 501c3 nonprofit, then they would absolutely be an eligible institutional partner. So there's a few questions that are fairly similar related to regional efforts and smaller towns that might be able to combine to participate in the program, and multiple municipalities. So my answer to that is yes. If you're coming from a place that's rural, or you have smaller communities with less populations, and you really think that a regional effort could be supported by this initiative and be valuable for the resident leaders within that particular region, you can submit an application with like a multi-municipality or multi-region. Just that region and municipality needs to be 300,000 or less. There's a question about like nonprofit status being new and can they apply? Yeah, absolutely. If you're a fairly new nonprofit, you can certainly apply to the fellowship. We just ask that you meet those eligibility requirements that I talked about. So you have to be committed to resident engagement and racial equity. You should have strong relationships with the fellows that will be proposed as part of the program, and also relationships across a broad spectrum of decision makers and stakeholders within your particular community. So again, I still have questions coming in about the population size of a neighborhood. So we're really looking at the population size of the city in terms of eligibility, not of a particular neighborhood. Okay. Let's switch on over to that area because I saw things coming there. Oh. Let me just go through this again to make sure that I covered all of the questions. I tried to lump a few together. There's a question about what the $10,000 can be used towards. Can it be used for the acquisition of land? And my response would be, it can certainly be used for that, but there's no expectation that there's land acquisition that happens within this program. It's not specifically for projects that are happening on vacant land. So the $10,000 could be used towards a reactivation project of a vacant lot. It could be used towards a creative placemaking program or project that happens. It could be used towards additional training and education and outreach to other resident leaders outside of the fellowship to talk about vacancy and abandonment, or to provide training on creative placemaking. So we really leave it up to the each community to think about how that $10,000 could be most valuable. There's a question about, should we be thinking about vacant lots or buildings where owners have been non-responsive, or kind of all of the above? And I would suggest thinking about what successful projects and reactivation efforts that have happened within your communities that have been resident-led. So a lot of times that does happen on vacant lots, but we've seen some really impressive work of reactivation and creative placemaking happening on commercial structures or on residential structures. So, and also in just disinvested neighborhoods and all of the efforts and community engagement activities that happen within those neighborhoods. So we encourage you to think on the spectrum of properties that are experiencing vacancy and abandonment. There's a question about, could an urban cohort partner with a close rural community apply? I'm not sure I totally understand that question, so feel free to re-enter it, but I'm assuming my statements related to a regional effort. If you're thinking about rural communities and multiple rural communities that could benefit from that program, they are eligible to apply in kind of a multi-municipal effort. There's a question about if we select the partners, we're selecting the entire applicant, so the entire cohort to participate in the program. So that would include the institutional partners and the 6 fellows that are proposed to participate. So we'll review kind of that comprehensive application. So we're looking for strong institutional partners and some really active and engaged resident leaders. So there's another question about using it for land or building renovation. I'm assuming that's related to the $10,000. And so that funding does not have to go towards any renovation or land acquisition. It's really up to the community on how they want to use that $10,000. Again, it could go towards a creative placemaking project, a pop-up event, training for resident leaders within their community. It could go towards a rehabilitation of a particular place. So we really leave it up to the community to decide how best to use that funding. So I think I answered all of the questions that are located in the question and answer file. Let me just go back to the chat. Okay. There's a question about recommendations on who the 6 fellows should be. We're really looking for active and engaged members of your community, those that have long-standing relationships within their neighborhoods and are seen as kind of that pivotal leader for their neighbors and communities. We're also interested in connecting with kind of the future leaders and emerging leaders. So we anticipate that most of the fellows will be doing this work in a volunteer capacity, and we encourage you to, reach out to the organizations and folks that are already doing this work to see if they're interested in participating. We will be sending out the recording and presentation following today's webinar. So I think I covered all or most of the questions. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email me. My email is ecoza@communityprogress.org, or better yet, I'd suggest you email the CRF email, which is crf@communityprogress.org, which is located right here on your screen. As a reminder, the applications are due by February 25th at 5:00 p.m. Eastern Time. So we look forward to seeing and reviewing your applications. We had a lot of participation on today's call, so I anticipate and hope to see and hear from you all fairly soon. So thank you so much for joining us today.